just don't doubt yourself. It's going to be fine.
Okay.
It's always going to be fine. Just keep that positive mentality. Don't get into the negative turn of things because that will bring more negativity. But always trust yourself. Okay. If you can't trust yourself, nobody else is going to trust you. My name is Sergio Troconis, and this is Entrepreneur Unleashed.
Welcome back to another episode of Entrepreneur Unleashed. My name is Edward Collins. I'm your host. And if you've been watching any of these episodes, you know that I firmly believe that the best way to shortcut your journey of success is to learn vicariously through others. Other business owners that have been through the thick and thin of it, have been where you may be now and where you're looking to get to. You can learn from what they've been doing. Essentially, knowledge is something that is your power. Your ability to get that knowledge and then ultimately put it into action is what's going to change your life. So we're joined today in the studio by Sergio. Sergio's going to talk about his life, and I'm going to ask him tons of questions. And I know you guys don't want to wait any longer, so let's just jump right into it. Sergio, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I know that I know a lot about what you're doing, but the audience may not. So if you wouldn't mind, give us like a high-level perspective of who you are and what you're doing right now.
Sure. I am an entrepreneur, and right now I'm a manager at a hedge fund.
Okay.
I've been doing it for a year now. Before that, I used to run a marketing agency, so I've been doing a ton of different things over the last 7 years since I first quit the 9-to-5. And right now it's raising capital for our hedge fund.
Awesome. Yep. When you look at the 9-to-5, obviously that's where a lot of people are at the moment, and they're actually thinking about getting into entrepreneurism. They're trying to think, well, how can I start a business? What type of business could I start? Before you started your business in the 9-to-5, what was it that motivated you to want to get out of that?
Well, I think that's a good question because it's different depending on anyone you ask. So for me, it's freedom, right? The 9-to-5, I like to do what is best for the business. And sometimes when you work at a business that's either mid-scale or large, you can only work within the parameters that they give you. So I am a very creative person. And for me, I need the freedom to find out what's best for the customer, the investor, and what's best for the business. And if I have that freedom for myself to do, I know that I can take the business a lot further. So that's the main reason for me. If money comes second, I tend not to be too money focused. I'd rather focus on the business and the money is the byproduct. But of course, the money would come second.
Yeah. I mean, if you're creating value for people, value creation leads to money, right? Money follows value creation in general. So what got you into the 9-to-5 though? Like what tell me a little bit about your background.
So it's funny because I dropped out of college.
Okay.
And the way that I got into the 9-to-5 was coincidental because number one, when I dropped out, I was a biology student. So I knew nothing about sales, marketing. I mean, and sales is one of the fundamental aspects of any business. And for any of you guys out there, if you are wanting to get more money in your life, get into sales. I always say that. So I went to biology, dropped out, and I met this developer through a family connection.
Okay.
And he was working with investors, right? I started raising capital.
So property development.
Property development, yeah.
Okay.
He was raising money from foreign investors and raising money through private equity. And I said, I love this space. It looks like there's a ton of money there. Let me work for you. It was kind of, he gave me a chance to work there. And that was my first corporate job.
Interesting.
Figuring out sales and marketing and raising money from 80-year-olds, and I was a 19, 20-year-old struggling because, nobody takes a younger kid serious raising money. But I think that for me was the fundamental piece of my life to develop that grit, right, is dealing with all of that. And that's where it all started from there.
Well, I know that like as a young person, it can be difficult and intimidating to be around people that have money because you don't have any yet. Also be around people that have life experience because you don't have any yet.
Exactly.
Like what was it that gave you the ability, the grit, if you will, to go into work each day and meet with people? Did you have mentors at the time, or were you reading lots of books? Like, what was it?
Yeah, actually, it was reading lots of books, but that's not enough, right? I mean, you have to implement. So you read, implement. At that age, I didn't know many mentors. So one of my biggest mentors was the owner of that development.
Okay.
We got close, right? He was a family friend, so our relationship was closer from the get-go.
Okay.
But it's also finding people through life, right? There's coincidences that happen. You're at an event, networking event, and you look at the person that's way above you, and you need to have that mindset as everybody sucks in the beginning, and that's going to be you and everything whenever you start.
Yeah.
And you got to understand that the person that doesn't suck, that's who you have to go and connect with, right? Because that's what's going to level you up. So that's always been a mindset for me, is not being the smartest person in the room. If anything, being the lowest person in the room, because that tells me I'm in the right room.
Yeah.
So that's how it helped me. And yeah, at 19, 20 years old, imagine me in an oversized suit.
Yeah.
And
I've been there. I remember when I did it. So I get it.
I was raising EB5s, and I'm sure
goodness.
you know that.
Yeah.
You know what that is. Yeah. And it was foreign investors.
Yeah. Trying
70,
to get them the green card environment.
Trying to get a green card. Their family, they're under a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
And it was tough, but it was necessary for me to develop that grit. So put yourself in positions to develop grit in order to get far.
Yeah, the green card through investment is definitely an interesting process for a lot of people to go through.
Yeah.
When you look at that experience for you, like when you were in the 9 to 5, were you networking at that point too? So you started off networking, getting to know people, because technically you were in sales, right, but as an employee, not as an independent contractor.
Correct. Okay. So it's interesting because when I got hired, at first they would supply leads to me, right, to start getting oriented, to start making calls. And then all of a sudden they said, you got to hit the streets. Yeah. So I had to develop my own leads. It took 2 years, but I was able to do it successfully. I raised $9 million at 20 years old.
Yeah.
For me at that age was fantastic.
That's huge.
Yeah, and it was good money. For a 20-year-old, I was making the most money out of all my friends.
Exactly.
And yeah, I had to go out there, knock on doors. I was working with a lot of realtors. These EB5s, there's a lot of realtors in Miami, Fort Lauderdale with foreign investors. And I was knocking on a lot of their doors, and I was able to build a whole database of 2,000 to 3,000 realtors over 2 years, because I was going to events every week.
All the time,
and
right?
Driving everywhere every week. So, yeah, I mean, it was a lot of networking.
What was your main tool, if you will, in networking? Did you have a tactic that you utilized in order to connect with people? What was it?
At the time or now?
At the time.
So at the time, it was... Well, through these networks and connections that I would make, I would always try to have a sales pitch or some type of presentation for their realtors. That would be my tactic. Okay. Because it was a lot more transactional, and that's why I ask you whether it was before or now. Because now, since I am the one of the managing partners of Currents Capital, the way I network is getting closer to the investor, really understanding their needs. Because back then it was a lot more transactional. It's okay, EB5, I know exactly what your needs are. You just need to know your money's safe. Right. And you need to make sure that we're developing the necessary jobs so that you could get your butt over here.
Exactly.
So back then it was a lot of public speaking.
Okay. Yeah. And then, so public speaking is interesting too, because you're going out in public, talking about your pitch, sharing that pitch with people that were stranger to you otherwise. Yeah. What did you do in order to learn how to do that well?
Trial and error. Okay. Trial and error, and a lot of YouTube videos, practice. God bless my girlfriend. She used to help me a lot. Back then it was the nitty gritty in the bedroom, 1 bedroom apartment that she had. And, we would practice in there, and that's how I got good. But I know that the first few presentations were horrific.
Oh, yeah.
But eventually I was giving presentations to groups of 50 people, and then 100 people, and then 150 people, and it got interesting.
I think this is a really important topic for people to really resonate with, because the concept of practicing, so many people don't do it. No. They'll go out there and they'll just try to wing it. Yep. I mean, I think it's so underrated, the value that you get from actually doing things over and over and again before you're doing them in front of other people, right?
Exactly.
To test it out. I can remember when I was younger, I was basically learning how to sell as well, and I would just practice in front of the mirror, just saying it over and over again. I know that sounds strange, but literally every person of success has practiced what it takes to get them the success they want, right? If you're talking about sports, you're not like, if you're a basketball player, you're not taking shots just in the game, right?
Right.
You're going to the courts beforehand. You're going to the courts after the game, and you're doing it over and over again.
Yep.
But the same thing happens in business and sales. I love that you touched on that.
Yeah.
When you look at where you were then, so you were doing pretty well in this sales capacity. I mean, you raised a ton of money at such a ridiculously young age. Like, that's unheard of. Like, a lot of people don't do that. Why did you make a decision then to transition out? Because you're making good money.
Because of the freedom.
It was the freedom.
The freedom.
And
Because
describe the freedom for me. Like, what was it that you were seeking?
it's funny because when I first started at that development agency or that real estate developer, they were starting out. So I was wearing many hats. And for me, that was great because I was exploring my strengths, and that was how I was able to find that position of, hey, official capital raiser. And eventually they came with the process of implementing strategies and implementing systems that would restrict my parameters in my position. So
okay.
from there, I said, hey, I'm making good money, okay, but I'm not happy anymore. Right. So what did I do? I started learning how to trade. And I've been trading from before this job. I've been dabbling. I mean, a lot of you know what Forex and stocks are. So I started learning about what all of that was. And throughout that transition, I was like, let me really learn how to trade. And like we just said, practice. I started waking up earlier, started learning how to trade from 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. when I had to go to work. And then when I got home, from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. So I was trying to condense the most amount of time to get out in the fastest amount of time possible. And I was successfully able to do it. So that was the main reason. Trading, I actually started making more than I was making at the developer.
Okay.
And I quit. From there, I resigned. I hate the word quit. I resigned. And from there, it's been the entrepreneurship journey from when I started.
When you handed in that resignation,
It was scary.
did you have a plan B in place at that point in time, or
Plan B? No, man.
so what did you do? Like you handed in a resignation, then what was the next step?
Just
because a lot of people
keep
are
trading,
wondering about that.
keep growing.
So you were basically saying, okay, I'm going to make my money, basically engaging in trading activity.
Exactly.
And I'm hoping that that'll be enough to support the lifestyle I'm building.
Myself, my girlfriend.
Exactly.
I mean, because that was another thing, right? We all have goals. We want to start retiring. We start making money. We start retiring people.
Yes,
you know?
exactly, right?
So for me, there was never a plan B. I can't picture myself ever quitting when I start something. So that was always my plan A. But it's funny because in life, there's always going to be coincidences. And throughout the time, I started meeting partners, right? Like my current partner, Cody, who was a big piece of my puzzle that started introducing me to new businesses. So one part is always sticking to the plan A, but always being open to perceiving those opportunities and those strategic partnerships that could either shift you to a new industry that you haven't touched yet or make you better in your current industry. Because the moment you think you know everything, you start losing.
Yes,
you know, so it's always staying a student. That's what I've always told myself as well.
Now, during that period of time, did you struggle at all? Was there any issues that came up? Like, tell us a little bit about that.
My rock bottom was when I had to steal toilet paper from a Japanese restaurant.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I'm definitely going to dive into this.
Yeah.
What led up to the rock bottom? Not the rock bottom itself, but what led up to it?
The mindset. In trading, I mean, I'm sure you've traded before. For me, it's 80% mindset. And the moment I quit, those first 6 months were like living in heaven. Because the negativities didn't start hitting yet.
Right.
The pressure of maintaining the bills paid, the debt paid. So I started making bad trades. I started thinking negatively. More bad trades started coming in, and I started getting more and more into debt. The account started coming down, and every single day you're like, crap, I have to make another trade. You start over trading, making more bad decisions. So it's part of it. Right now I laugh, but in the moment it was tough. And that one night, my girlfriend and I went to go eat at a Japanese restaurant in Miramar, and she came back, and we were outside on the street, and she's like, hey, I did something. Don't be mad at me, but I know you're going to be happy about it. She opened up her purse, and there was a piece of toilet paper, or like the whole roll, and we celebrated. And then when we were done celebrating, we were like, what have we gotten to? that were celebrating stealing this piece of toilet paper. So for me, might sound silly, but the toilet paper was a huge shift in my life. And that, because remember, when you're in a negative mindset, you're not perceiving any opportunities, you're just in the shit. So that's what flipped the switch, and I'm like, okay, I understand myself. I can't live completely off of trading because the pressure for me is too much. I need to have at least two sources that offset each other. And that's where I started perceiving opportunities, and guess what? 6 months later, I met my partner. We started getting into different businesses, and things started getting better.
Okay. What was the first business you got into?
With my partner?
Yes.
Marketing.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit. Like, what was that business like?
So it was all social media marketing, branding, content creation, podcasts like this. And I was always reluctant to be on social media. So it was a big mindset shift, paradigm shift. And it was tough for me to transition simply because, hey, I need to do this or else I'm going to keep trading negatively. So I need to offset it. So I had to have that personal conversation with myself and make it happen. So that agency, I ran it with him for about 4 or 5 years. He ran it before me, but he brought me on as one of the guys that would have the client relationships with their clients and manager of all the people that would be working with us. And it was a good journey because that's what helped me build my social presence, because that's what we were doing for people. And I said, why not myself? So I started growing my page. I started creating content, started going to networking events again. Because as a trader, you say, I'm a hermit now. I don't need anybody
I'm sitting in front of my
money.
Screens, and I'm going to let that be the way I live my life. Right?
Exactly. And and I'm an extrovert. I'm an introverted extrovert.
Okay.
So I like to go out and meet people. So for me, I see it as a coincidence because there's strengths that I wasn't using. And thanks to that, I was able to start using them again, and they flourished. So I was like, okay, this is a sign that I gotta go all in, and I did, and things really blew up from there. Okay. Yeah.
Now you're in an environment where you're building your social media presence at that point.
Yep.
What were some of the tactics you used to do that?
There's many. There's of course the content creation. There's advertising. There's press release that you can obtain, paid press. It helps with views. And then there's leveraging influencers, right? So we did a lot of leveraging influencers. We had a whole bunch of connections that would bring influencers to the table.
What type of connections you're talking about?
So there's brokers out there that they would find a plethora of influencers that would be willing to run campaigns for other people, right? Hey, go follow this guy. Go follow that guy. Shout-outs, essentially. Yeah. So that was the main thing we were doing.
Okay.
And that's how I grew mine. So it was a mix of shout-outs, going to networking events, and advertising content. There's a formula to it. Okay. Right. But yeah.
When you look at the things that move the needle the most, what would that have been?
In what sense?
From building your social profile, what were the things that you were doing that had the most impact?
Getting in front of the camera.
That's it. Start it, right?
Yep.
And how did you build the confidence to do that? Because so many people are so fearful of getting on camera in the first place. Yeah.
Same mentality I used when I started doing the speaking gigs.
Okay.
So it's funny because I've done speaking in front of hundreds of people, but when I raise the camera and I'm in front of a story, I start stuttering, start messing up.
Yeah.
It's like, how am I getting nervous with myself? You know? So, because there's, on the other side, there's maybe 100,000, 50,000 people watching you.
Yeah.
So it gets in your head. But what we mentioned at first is practice, right? You have to do it. Sometimes you just got to pick it up, talk your stuff, post it, don't even think about it.
Right.
And whatever happens, which sometimes those are the best type of posts when you actually mess up 5 times because you feel more human.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes we tend to get too robotic. So, yeah, that was it for me, is kind of just filming, posting until I got good at it.
Yeah, and it's the repetition.
Repetition.
We live in this Instagram society right now where most people just see the end result. They just see
the good stuff.
Exactly. They see the edited clip.
Exactly.
Right? I had one post on Instagram. It has a little over 2.1 million views on it, and it's awesome.
Right.
But I didn't take that in one take. I mean,
I believe you.
I'm sure. I imagine, like, my team can tell you, I probably took 19 takes in order to get like something that's just 45 seconds long.
I see him laughing.
Yeah,
I see him laughing.
Right? Like that, and that's the reality. Like, I when I post and it's published, it sounds great, right? Because it's curated.
Correct.
My team has edited it. Make sure they get the right angles, and then,
they cut you off like 10 times, and it sounds like a whole sentence.
And it sounds and that process is something. Even then, it's taken me a long time to be able to get it down to just 19 takes. Right. Like, because one, I am a perfectionist. You don't need to be that, though, right? There are plenty of people that can build a real good social media presence without having like perfection in the mix, right? You can just be authentically you, right? And that can move the needle. I love it.
Yeah, and that's a good topic, because it's a good point, because there's a lot of influencers out there that they're too perfect. Yeah. Right. And for me, now that we're in the topic of the marketing, there's an influencer bubble. There's too many, right? And there's going to be a point where influencers are just doing things for money and perfection, and people are going to stop following them. People are going to stop buying from them. Companies are going to stop trusting influencers, and there's going to be a whole shift, right? Out of the millions of influencers there are, probably half of those are going to get chopped off, and the ones that are going to stay are the ones who are influential in their own authenticity, and people who follow them because they can actually connect. But if I go on social media, I'm like, I'm perfect. I've never been through any struggle. I make millions on a daily basis. Right. Who the hell is going to connect with me? Exactly. Because the big guys aren't on social media anyway. Exactly. You know, so you got to have that authenticity, and there's no better vibration than authenticity.
Oh my goodness, yes.
You know, I heard Gary Brecka talk about that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And authenticity is just, when you incorporate that, conversations flow.
I was talking with another social media star, if you will, millions of subscribers type of situation. And he was just talking about just be authentically you, because there's 8 billion people on the planet, about 6 billion of them using some form of social media at any given point in time. Right. You don't need all 6 billion in your camp. No. You need the ones who resonate with you. And if you try to be fake, I mean, that's just so much work. Like you constantly have to be someone who you're not. I am who I am. Right. Like when you see me on socials, that's just me. Yeah. I mean, maybe 19 takes later, but it's still me. I mean, I don't present myself to be anything other than who I am. Right. And I just think that's the thing that gets people to connect and resonate with me. Correct. And I think that's why people resonate with you. You are who you are. Like when I dive through your social media and I'm like, yeah, that's Sergio. Yeah. Why? Because I had a conversation with him the other day. This is how he talks.
I have some videos and reels on there that I just stuttered 2 times, and I'm like, whatever.
Yeah, whatever. But that's just you, and that's why people resonate with you. That's why people connect with you, and that helped move the needle in your agency. Yeah, and it built your popularity. It built your people can know, like, and trust you. Right. What was the next step though? Because the marketing endeavor, how long was that? That was years. That was years.
Yeah, that
like
was
4 years,
that turned into my whole career essentially. I mean, I started doing trading part-time at that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what made you decide to make a change? Because again, that happens, right? Yeah. You made a change out of the 9 to 5 because you wanted freedom. Correct. But now you were in a state, quote unquote, of freedom, as much as any business owner can be really free. Right. We're the crazy ones.
We go from 9 to 5 to 24/7.
Exactly, right? We trade the ability to work 40 hours for someone else to work 80 to 100 hours for ourselves.
Exactly, which I'd rather do any day.
Absolutely, it's your baby. Yeah. But what was the thing that motivated you to make another change?
From marketing to hedge fund?
To anything else?
Well, I think there's 2 things. Number one, social media marketing agencies right now, there's a lot of them. It got real saturated. Okay. Let me backtrack. It got real saturated, and there's a lot of them that are kind of falling off, and revenue starts slowing down. So that's number one. And number 2, we just wanted to get bigger. And sometimes the vehicle that you're in isn't the indicated vehicle, right? It's not the correct one. There's some vehicles that you could really squeeze the juice out of. And we said, where do the wealthy play, right? Hedge funds.
Yeah, they play with money. They play with money.
Right? So we saw an opportunity because we're always also investing our money, and we found some really good strategies that worked for us. So we said, why can't we just implement these strategies? We've built a huge network of people over the last 6-7 years, and we bring those opportunities to the few people who are accredited within those networks to our fund.
Okay.
So it has to do with that, and the strategies that we found, and understanding that, hey, we do have big goals, we do have audacious goals. We have to find a new vehicle that can do that for us.
Interesting.
And for me, marketing has always been real good for me because it helps me better connect with people, right? Everything has to do with relationships, and being able to go through that marketing phase before I got into the hedge fund phase kind of reintroduced me again to start connecting with people, right? Because when I was trading, if I went to trading to start raising capital again, I became an introvert, right? Because I wasn't talking to anyone other than my girlfriend, my family.
Right.
So, yeah, that's why it transitioned for me.
When you look at that transition itself, though, like obviously that you recognize that that's where money was happening, right?
Correct. Yeah.
But what were the steps you took? Because
it was tough.
A fund is not easy.
No, it's not.
So what steps did you take?
Yeah.
One, to learn about that, and then two, to implement it.
So first of all, there's transitioning within industries where there's going to be a gap, right? Because opening the fund took about 4 or 5 months.
Okay.
It took a lot of money. And of course, through that 5-month period, you're speaking to your attorney, your admin group, your auditors, and you're learning through the steps that you go through. My partner, he has real good connections with a lot of different attorneys and admin groups that the attorney is able to refer. So he starts learning about that. I bring in my expertise of capital raising, and I start reintroducing myself to that. So there's that 5-month transition where it went from making a ton of revenue to stopping the agency and making no money. Yeah. So that was that for me. That was scary. Yeah, but I was like, hey, if I did this once, I could do it again, right? And every single time we go through this 4 or 5 month transition, because it's not the first time I've done it, I know that when it's done and we start the ball rolling, the return is 10x, right? 100x, whatever it is. So throughout those 5 months, it was a lot of going back to the drawing board, reading books on investing again, right? Because I do have my own trading strategy, but we're working for retail investors and institutional investors, accredited investors. So throughout those 5 months, it was just reintroducing myself to it, learning everything I could about the hedge fund. I mean, I have money saved up, so it's not like throughout the 5-month period I need to figure something else out to do. Right. So it was like school for me, I went back to school with books and YouTube University. Nothing. It's just learning. Now it's learning through experience, right? Every single month we learn something new. Every single month we have more capital under management. And with that, you have to update your strategy and you have to change your strategy, right? For every X amount of money you manage, you need new strategies. It's not the same one isn't going to work the same if you have 10 million today and 100 million tomorrow, and you know this. So it's a progressive learning process. Yeah.
When you look at the YouTube University as an example, what I find so many people trying to do is to wing it and just like go on there and use it as a search engine and hope for the best. Like, how did you learn to curate the information you're getting? Because that seems to be the most difficult thing.
Yeah, because there's a lot of information out there that you shouldn't listen to.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I think it's learning through experience. So when I started, I got rid of all those personal development videos that you would see, right? The Think and Grow Rich, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. There's a ton of other books that I've read. So right now I'm not focused on personal development, but I know exactly what my investor needs from me, and I know how to curate that and find the specific information. And once I do, whoever's teaching that influencer or YouTuber, I have to research them to make sure that they are doing what they said they're doing.
Exactly.
Right? Because there's guys out there that they say, how to manage 100 million. Yeah. I can't talk about that because I'm not there yet. But they are, because they read it or learned from it from another YouTube channel. Right. You're not there yet. You can't be teaching if you haven't had that experience yet. There's ways that you could do it, but yeah, that's my process, is making sure that person knows what they're doing and that it's a proven process.
Yeah. I find it's so difficult because, like, what I've gotten into now is a lot of people will ask me to take a look at the videos that they find online and determine whether or not it's legitimate.
Right.
And I think there are a lot of well-meaning content creators out there.
I saw that you reviewed a few recently.
And I try to be nice about it because I think for the most part, a lot of them are well-meaning. Like they're just trying to do what's best for their community.
Right.
And they share things that they may have heard, but it's not stuff that they actually know.
Yep.
And like it's taken me 25 years to learn the things that I know about the tax code and how to structure businesses and how to create wealth through business or real estate. Like it's taken me a long time to learn that stuff, and I've learned it by actually doing it.
Right.
So when I jump into some of these videos and you hear some of the things that are said, I'm like, where did you ever hear that? Because that's just not right. Like you can't do it that way. In your curation process then, so you would go back and investigate those individuals who were sharing the concepts with, like, so that you knew that you could follow it, or?
Of course. For example, there's a guy online that I'm going to one of his events this month. He's called Bridger Pendington, right? Fund Launch.
Yeah.
He's talking about opening up hedge funds. So I wanted to make sure that he's ran a hedge fund before and that he's been successful at it. And that's pretty as simple as a Google search and searching maybe even the companies that they own. You know, you just start going through that rabbit hole.
Do your due diligence. Exactly.
Everyone should always do it, no matter what you're doing, either researching for education or researching to make an investment.
Yeah.
You got to do it. You know, and it's funny because people go to university and school and they don't research their own teachers.
Exactly, right?
You know, who is this guy that's people working in Harvard, for example, that might be teaching an MBA class or course, and they've never ran a successful business or a business worth $1 billion, and they're just talking about how to do that. Right.
Yeah, so there's difference between academics and real wisdom, right?
Exactly.
Wisdom is the practical application of knowledge earned.
Exactly. I mean, you can write a review on someone who did it.
Yeah.
But it's not the same coming from that person.
Exactly.
You know, there's pieces of experience, like you said, that you don't post anywhere. You keep it to yourself until somebody asks.
Exactly.
You know.
Wow. Yeah. When you look at where you are now then, so you're operating this hedge fund, you're building it up. Like, what's your day-to-day like? Like, what are you engaged in on a regular basis?
So right now I'm taking the position as well as COO. So we are implementing processes for client relationships. We're implementing hopefully a new CRM soon. But my day-to-day, I wake up, you know, I do my routine. I have to make sure that I'm good mentally and physically before I go out there and start speaking to people. And pretty much there's a lot of calls throughout the day to raise capital. And now we're going to be, you know, building more relationships with our investors. So it's a mix of just a bunch of calls to our investors, making sure everything is going right. And we do daily reporting for our investors. So we have a team.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's intense.
It's rigorous, but it's competitive. So we want to stay ahead. And that's my day to day. It's simple, but I've been able to structure it to call it simple, you know?
I'm curious, like, as chief operating officer, if you will, COO, the development of process and procedure, like, tell us a little bit about how you go about doing that. Because I think that's an area that a lot of business owners struggle in.
Correct.
That they don't build out processes and procedures, not officially.
Right.
And they sort of wing it, right?
Yep.
A lot of business owners are, unfortunately, in the habit of winging it because sometimes they get it right.
And lack of capital, too.
Lack of capital.
Yeah.
So what's your process for developing processes and procedures?
So it's funny because I've learned through osmosis and I've learned through courses.
Okay.
So I took a course for Six Sigma.
Oh, yeah.
While I was working with the developer.
Okay.
And while I was working with the developer, that's where he made the transition from a new company to a company with strategies or a company with structure and processes. So I was able to physically be there as it happened. So I took all of that in, and for me, it's what I did with the marketing agency with my partner when he brought in. I developed systems to streamline processes. And if you're getting into a company that already has employees and has people taking different hats, number one is making sure that each person knows what hat they have on, interviewing that person, making sure that they're even strong for that position. And if they're not, you switch them over to another one. And replicating that process for a new hire. So it's grabbing everyone's input, making sure they're right for it, making sure that that process that they're managing, either for account managers, capital raisers, administrators, whatever it is, that you can replicate that for somebody else. So that's the way I see it. And fixing those little discrepancies in the processes that aren't necessary, and that might be costing time and money. And those processes usually result in more money and a happier investor.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. When you look at what's next for you guys, like where do you see things going over the course of the next 2 to 5 years?
We want to get to $1 billion AUM. We have been implementing strategic partnerships. Right now, we have strategies in equities and Forex. We're getting into private equity with a strategic partnership that's going to bring us access to those private deals before they IPO. And then we're getting into real estate. So it's moving into new vehicles, again, the vehicle thing. That's going to bring us the capacity to bring that amount of money in and being able to consistently bring in a positive return. So that we have an audacious goal, and it's to have $1 billion AUM. Makes me excited.
It's definitely doable. It's definitely doable. When you look at the areas of struggle right now, though, like what would you identify as the biggest challenges that you guys are going through?
Like any new fund, and I'm assuming because we're a new fund, and I've spoken to other guys that have newer funds, it's getting in the streets, right? Getting around the right circles. Building trust. And sometimes that trust comes with time. And unfortunately, we can't speed up time. So that's the biggest challenge is, okay, we're getting into the right rooms, but we are the new kids on the block. And we're always going to be perceived as that until we hit our 5-year mark, 10-year mark, which is fine. But that's it, because everything else has been, thank God, has been pretty smooth, right? The raising capital has been smooth. The returns have been smooth. So far, so good.
One of the things I like to do with every guest that comes on is I like to do sort of like this mental exercise. And if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to take you down this journey. What I like to do is I want you to imagine for a moment that you have the ability to go back in time to any previous version of you in your life. And you can share with that younger version of Sergio one piece of wisdom. What would that nugget of wisdom be, and who would you be giving it to?
Wow. There's so many things I'd like to say. Because in every phase, you have different worries and different doubts. I would say number one is never doubt yourself. I'd keep it very simple and condensed. I would say just don't doubt yourself. It's going to be fine. It's always going to be fine. Just keep that positive mentality. Don't get into the negative turn of things, because that will bring more negativity. But always trust yourself. If you can't trust yourself, nobody else is going to trust you. So that, and stick it through. Somebody told me stick it through 7 years ago. That's been engraved in my head. Every time I go through some type of trouble or whatever, that quote keeps me going.
Interesting. What younger version of Sergio needed to hear that most?
Right before I started working in my corporate job. And the one when he quit, and it was a year later when I was really struggling. Those two.
Wow.
And there's going to be a lot more.
I'm sure. That's life, right? Well, there's a second part to this exercise. I want you to imagine then for a moment that a future version of Sergio has now come back in this moment and is joining us during this conversation, and he's going to share a piece of wisdom with you now. What would he share?
I would say it's going to turn out a lot better than you expect.
Yes. I love that.
You know, all those little worries and things that happen in between, it's going to turn out way better than you expect.
I love it.
You know, and I don't know if you've ever seen that video, which is a visual of you in a problem, and then it starts panning out, and it goes to the universe and then the galaxies.
You're
a little speck in the universe.
We all are.
At the end of the day, none of it matters, right? But it's always going to turn out better than you expect.
Now is the only thing that's real.
Now is the only thing that matters. The past is frozen. It can't move. It can't change. The future hasn't happened yet. So right now is what you need to do to make whatever it is you want to do happen.
Wow.
You know?
Well, I appreciate you so much for coming out here.
Thank you.
How, if the audience wanted to get in touch with you, learn more about what you're doing, like your story, how you're actually helping people, like what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
My Instagram.
Okay.
So it's my first and last name, Sergio Troconis, 1_, and that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So all the fake ones out there, to make sure that
all the fake ones, that's the one. Not 2 underscores, not 3, 4.
Okay.
1_.
I'll make sure that it's in the show notes as well.
Sure.
Sergio, thank you so much for coming out and sharing so authentically with us.
Sure.
I know that I've enjoyed it. And guys, I know you've enjoyed it too. And if you have, and you're not yet a member of UpLevel and our community, you definitely want to do it, because even though this particular episode is over, Sergio's going to be sticking around to share some actionable counsel to the individuals that are part of the community. So if you want to learn how to get access to that, be sure to go to uplevelentrepreneur.com/join UpLevel, and ultimately get an opportunity to learn vicariously through this guy even more than you've already enjoyed so far. Once again, my name is Edward Collins. This has been another episode of Entrepreneur Unleashed. I thank you so much for investing your time with us, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Bye for now.